Good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining this webinar. We've got an exceptional panel talking on a really hot topic of AI data governance. This session is going to be recorded and will be released in the next few days on TDL's YouTube channel, and we'll also provide a summary report, which is available on our Substack account. With that, questions can be made through the chat facility to the moderator, well, to me, or to the moderator, who is Claire Vishik, who is a TDL strategic advisor. And so over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, David, and thanks to TDL for hosting us. Today, we are going to discuss a topic that has been at the forefront of many conversations with regard to artificial intelligence technology. What do we need to do to ensure that AI data is collected and governed in an optimal fashion? A lot of constituencies looked at this problem, certainly regulators, certainly the researchers, a lot of practitioners, as well as a lot of builders, people who build those systems in different areas. We have always heard that the systems in artificial intelligence are as good as the data they are built on. It is frequently ascribed to the quality of data that there are some errors, sometimes significant errors, and some concerns about safety, some additional concerns about explainability that draw from the data that has been collected. There were various attacks modeled that depended on the issues of AI data, specifically data quality and data completeness, and how it relates to safety, data provenance, and how it relates to a variety of issues, and so on. The topic is enormous. It comprises everything from regulations to research to practice to engineering to standards. Today, we are going to focus on data sets that don't PII predominantly, although it's important to avoid other types of data sets. And we are going to talk about governance that includes accuracy and complete data consistency, data balance, and certainly its provenance. We are fortunate to have a distinguished panel today of speakers that have very different backgrounds and can speak about this issue from different points of view. In alphabetical order, we have Vigdis Broder, who is counsel at Biddle Law firm. We have Josh Eckroth, who is the chief research engineer at Y2K Connect. And he is also a research scientist at Stetson University. We are fortunate also to have Rohit Israni, who is founder and CEO of Certient AI, and also chair of AI standards in Insights. We have Chris Kenyon, who is associate professor of mathematics at University College London. Athena Makropoulou, who is a professor of electrical engineering and computer science at UC Irvine. And finally, Jane Usileto, who works in AI governance, privacy, and security engineering. With that, I am going to ask to this distinguished panel. I am going to ask each of you to comment on your view of the most important topics, challenges, and lessons learned in AI data governance for the subset of the data that we are discussing. What do you think about the main issues? Or what do you think we learned since AI became prominent again? Let's talk about that. We are going to start from Vigdis. What is your view?
Hi. So, as you mentioned, Claire, thank you for inviting me to join this panel. I am coming in from the legal perspective. So I work at a law firm that focuses on representing standards for technology consortia. And so I see my clients are thinking through some of the following priorities when it comes to AI data and use. And I think these are topics that are, well known around reliability, the current data and keeping it updated, the purpose for which they're bringing in data or using data, and then overall quality validation. And so they have had various strategies that they're deploying to address those around different partnerships and diligence processes to identify quality signals to assist in validating that data. But from the legal counsel perspective, I come in with a little different angle and really sort of zero in on licensing strategies and constraints, both inbound and outbound for those clients that have outbound data licensing, and certainly struggle with the lack of consistency when it comes in there. I think that it's a big challenge in terms of lack of consistency and standardization across the different applications of AI data, and it comes in from licensing terms, but also applicable legal frameworks and geographical information and applicability. So we really focus on intended applications and try to identify relevant data concerns and compliance obligations, and have to tailor those situations pretty specifically to each particular situation, given the general lack of consistency that we see in the overall AI space.
Thank you. How do you identify those concerns? Is there a methodology for that, or is it entirely application and case dependent?
I have, yeah, mostly case dependent in terms of really looking at the specific data that we're looking at and the partnerships or platforms and services that we're dealing with, and taking a look at those terms, and then really focusing on the intended applications in order to understand the different areas of focus and the concerns around the data. So there will be some where currency is of utmost value, some where the overall, like, there's more of a need for much data as possible, and where the specific input of data is less relevant. And so it's more of a numbers game, but it really depends on the individual client, the applications, and then the data sets in question.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very interesting. Let's look at the engineering point now. Josh, what do you think about the state of AI data governance?
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to point out, I expect we're talking about generative AI, which a lot of us know is the new thing in AI, but of course, it's also, I think, drastically more revolutionary than the one all the decades before. But in generative AI, these are models, is what we call them, that are trained on a bunch of data, like crazy amounts of data, but they're trained to understand the patterns in that data and then essentially reproduce them. So now there are agentic systems that these models will have agency, meaning that they'll make a decision based on your input to run functions or do actions. And that's, I think, not really the same discussion, because that's more a matter of, do you know who is developing this and what those actions are? Or did you link your Gmail to ChatGPT? I mean, that's kind of, you should know then that it's going to access all your emails. So for just looking at the models themselves, because they're trained to recognize patterns, and personally identifiable information and other things like that actually don't have patterns, it's actually not effective to train with that. Personally identifiable information, because I mean, you just look at the name, the whole idea is that it's very distinctive. And so you can't really guess a person's name from their social security number. You can't really guess their SSN from their name. You can't really guess where they live based on the birth date. I mean, you can get a vague sense, but not identify. And for that reason, it's actually not effective to train a model with that input, because it will simply hallucinate that stuff on the output side. And we've experienced this, like as far as strategy, we've worked through the strategy with building a model that was trained on research papers. And so those included all sorts of citations and mentions of table 5 and figure 2 and so on, which is not useful later because there's no table 5 later when you're using it. So we actually strip that stuff out of the training data first. Now, when you use the model and you provide like a prompt, then that's a question of, what are you willing to provide to this model? Not because it's going to remember it, because an AI, a generative model, is not in training mode all the time, but just what's the task you're trying to perform? Are you trying to have it make a report with a bunch of people's information in it or whatever? If you're using a third party like OpenAI or Anthropic and you're providing this information that's private, well, that's just a matter of, do you trust the companies? Do they have privacy policy and so forth? It's not really about the AI at that point. So I want to, from an engineering perspective, I want to kind of clarify the distinction between a model that's trained on sensitive data or a model that's being used with sensitive data, and issues about what the company is going to do with that data that you send are not really about the AI aspect of it. So that's kind of my perspective at the start. I think you're on mute, Claire.
Very concise and very clear. Do you think that the impact on the data completeness, especially for just for the sake of an example, small language model, is significant? If we are talking about a set of metrics, for instance, and it doesn't include a certain area, or if we are talking about some kind of a geographical system that emits a certain geography, what impact there will be on sort of the outcomes in chat systems, agentic systems, and so on?
Yeah, it's a good question. When designing a system with this, with a model like that, one has to decide at what point do you switch over to using the database? Because generative AI models, I mean, let's just speak about language models. They're revolutionary in their ability to tease out the nuance of language and also generate nuanced language. But they're not databases. They can't memorize facts and they can't recover facts. If you have, say, geographic information in a GIS database, that's the best place for it. The best use of the model is to figure out when they ask for, give me statistics about cancer rates in some location, whatever. That question, he needs to get translated to the right query to the database, but then the database has the information that you have vetted. So there's no real benefit of asking the model to remember that kind of stuff and reproduce it when it's that specific, because it's simply incapable of it, for one thing, and it will be prone to hallucinations.
Interesting. Thank you very much for that discussion. I looked at it in a different way, but you certainly are the expert. Rohit, you were really at the foundation and inception of what we call AI governance, right? What are your views from your experience in standard and in your new company as to the state of the art here? What are the main
Thank you,
issues
Claire.
in data governance?
Thank you, Claire. And I think you're bringing up a very important topic. And from the inception, when the AI Standards Committee actually started, and this was in 2017, this was the CEOs of several companies, large companies like Microsoft, Google, Intel, also asking about what would be the standards for AI. And the initiative got started in 2017. And one of the first things that the committee did, and this is a very well thought out decision, there was already a body of work that was going on in big data standards. There were a set of standards that were being written in big data. But what the committee did in ISO is they brought that body of work, which is the big data standards, and they brought them in the artificial intelligence committee as a subgroup and an important subgroup. That got the name of that got changed to data. And as of now, the AI subcommittee, which is ISO, IC, JTC1, SC42, has a working group which is focused on data coming from the work that originally got started in big data. And what's happened over the last several years is that there is a series of data quality standards. It's called 5259 that got released. We've also done some webinars on it, and it's a very comprehensive look at data quality. So, for example, it describes data quality characteristics very comprehensively in terms of accuracy, completeness, consistency, credibility, currentness, accessibility, compliance, confidentiality, efficiency, precision, traceability, understandability, availability, portability, recoverability, auditability, identifiability, effectiveness, balance, diversity, relevance, representation, similarity, and timeliness. So, in terms of like data quality characteristics, this is a very comprehensive look, and it's a series of standards that got released. Now, coming to the second part of the question, my perspective, especially from the startup I'm building, and I'll build on some things that Joshua kind of alluded to, which is the way the world is moving towards generative AI and now towards agentic AI, where as you have agents operating in companies, what data do they have access to? What privileges do they have? How is this being managed? How is this being controlled? Josh mentioned, access to Gmail and an agent. Do you give it? Do you not? But there's a lot of broad set of thinking around managing in this context, both in terms of policies and data for agentic AI system. That's something that certainly is upcoming. The second thing that I may mention, Claire, is there is data that's hidden, that's not something that we know about, right? And we are now living in the world of the personable browser. I did this experiment with ChatGPT where I had a set of prompts that I had written, and it was a long dialogue. And obviously, ChatGPT also, or any other foundational model which provides a chat interface, they have a history of your engagement. And within your engagement, when you ask them questions, is there something about me that perhaps I may not know about myself? Based on the pattern of your prompts, they're able to actually give you very insightful knowledge. So your your model there actually learns a lot about you based on your history of interaction with it, to such an extent that I asked it my Myers-Briggs type, which is what is my personality type, based on not sharing what it is, but based on the way I interact with you. And it guessed it absolutely accurately. I am an INTP with the possibility of a J, so the P and a J are a question, and it actually guessed that, and I was completely shocked that the computer now knows my personality. And when you think about it, that's not data I shared with it. And if you think about the way the browsers with Perplexity releasing Comet as a browser and the personable browser, so we're now moving to a world where, based on the pattern of our prompts and the exchange of data, there is more information that perhaps machines and computers would know about ourselves. So I'll end on that thought.
Interesting point. Do you think if you provided misleading information in your prompts, that misleading direction would be discovered because it would not be consistent, or you think that will be taken at face value. It's just data, it just bytes.
Very interesting question, and I will try that experiment too. But I have a guess that it'll be able to see that change. So let's say my style of introversion, the kind of questions that I write, the way I write them, if it moves to a slightly different style as an experiment, I'm pretty sure it will pick up that change, because if it's able to pick up the subtle difference between me potentially being a J or a P, I have a feeling it would have that understanding that perhaps it's not even the same user that's prompting me right now. So I would lay my bet it probably will.
Interesting. Most of my AI projects had to deal with scientific data that included metrics, and mostly the accuracy was not as encouraging as what you experienced for personality types. And that probably tells us something about the data that feeds those models from prompts and various discussions. But a fascinating discovery. Chris, as long as I can remember, there was an expectation that AI in its previous iteration and in its current iteration now will have a significant impact on finance in general, just because of the tradition of statistical analysis there, and because of the amounts of data that have been accumulated. Where is the field now? And in general, what do you think about AI data governance and its state today?
Okay, so thanks for the invitation. And I should also preface that these are my own opinions, not those of current or former employers. And also I'm going to talk, as you invited, from a perspective of finance. So in the finance world, there's been a data quality standard for a long time called BCBS 239, which calls for accuracy, timeliness, consistency, traceability, and unique data definitions, all the things that you would expect. So that deals with the what, but the more interesting question is, how about the how? How are we going to achieve what we want to achieve? And here I would talk about return on investment. So that's to do with accountability and incentive alignment. Let me talk about three categories of data to illustrate this. So let's talk about executable data. So that's where you're provided with data that you can then take an action on. For example, a broker provides you with a firm quote for an instrument. That means you can then trade at that price. So the data coming in is executable, it's firm data, and it means the provider has taken responsibility because there's a consequence. So that's what I would call executable data. Then if we talk a bit the other side of the fence, actionable data. So data that changes a user's action. So it could change the balance sheet or it could change a price. So it's the accountability is very naturally on the producer of this actionable data. And then I would consider a third case, which I call speculative, where no one has taken responsibility for the return on investment. And there, it's very hard to see how quality can be achieved or continued. So those are kind of three categories of data: executable, actionable, and speculative. And they fit within this question of incentive alignment and where is the return on investment.
And that's the kind of framework within which I tend to think about these problems. And surrounding all of it is a governance process, because if you don't have a well-defined governance process, then all the rest is, it might happen, it might not happen, and that's not a good way for an organization to run something that's this important.
So much information in this short statement. Thank you. Thank you very much. So do you think moving beyond finance, there is a return on investment associated with the appropriate data governance process and quality and accuracy of data? The way artificial intelligence is used these days does not put a premium on accuracy. The predominant applications do not really value it to the extent it is done in finance. So what do you think needs to happen for the return on investment from data governance and quality to improve outside of finance?
That's an area where I really don't know anything, so I can't. So let me pass on that question.
Thank you. That is probably true for all of us. This is a question where there are no answers yet. Athena, what are your thoughts? You really have looked into what proper data is and how it needs to be managed. So you have direct experience on the processes that are the most appropriate, the lessons learned, and so on. What do you think?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. So I come to this from the perspective of user personal data more than organizational data. So, and I have been looking at how personal data are collected, shared, and used. And with Gen AI coming into prominence, how does this change the concerns that we had? So PII was always a big part of user privacy. And even without AI in the picture, addressing PII is a difficult problem because as we know from the literature of de-anonymization, you can remove all PIIs you know of, and there are still patterns in the data that uniquely identify users. So even by itself, the problem is not easy. Now, adding AI onto it, you have to worry about the data itself, whatever PII is in there, but also the inferences that can be drawn from them. So that's what makes the problem more difficult with AI. And I would like to revisit something the previous panelists said. When we think of personal data and PII, we can think of them at the training phase and also at the inference stage. So a lot of work has been put on protecting data that have been used for training. People are trying to remove explicit PIIs. They try to create synthetic data before they train. They go in great lengths to do the right thing when they use training data. I would like to add to what Joshua said, that although PIIs don't in themselves have patterns, they can be memorized. These large models have memorization capabilities, and there is a range of attacks that they are known, that they are crafting the prompts to spit out sensitive information that has been memorized in the data itself. So that's a difficult problem on its own. In addition to the training data part, there is the inference stage. So when we use ChatGPT on a browser or on in any form, there are the patterns that Rohit mentioned, that ChatGPT and other models keep memories and they keep a history of our discussions. And they do that to personalize the responses. And they learn a lot about us, like the example that Rohit said. There's another body of work that's just starting, trying to clean those conversations. So there's already work that tries to scrub PIIs from those conversations if the user accidentally gives them. And also, it's an open problem how you obfuscate those conversations. Should you be like yourself but close? Should you be the opposite of yourself? So what are the right obfuscation strategies for chat? This is an open, ongoing discussion. And I will stop here. So I think the problem of data governance and especially as it comes to user protection, was difficult enough. And now it's on steroids because of the additional inference capabilities.
Excellent, excellent points. If we extrapolate what you said to confidentiality issue, which is very similar, at least technically, if confidential data or data that could be combined with other data to be confidential is shared via prompts for training and then during the inference phase, do you think there are any technologies that would protect the confidentiality from being exposed?
We're talking about training data or user data?
Both.
There is work on both. There is work on both fronts. So there is work on protecting data sets used for training. So that's called privacy preserving training for these models. And there is work that tries to, at the inference stage, to scrub PIIs, as I said. There are already pieces of work at even companies that do that on the browser or on the mobile. But this is an active area. But you're talking more about more confidential data that can be combined with additional data, right?
I'm talking about a situation that can be observed in various research papers where information that is partially confidential, share it via prompt, and then it's included in the responses to others, and combined with other partially confidential data shared by others could actually lead to really confidential information disclosed. It's sort of the same problem as information about the users being disclosed, right?
Yes.
Only it's not about the users.
Yeah. So that's a very good question. I don't know of clean solutions yet on that, but that's a concern because of the inference capabilities of these models, combining different pieces to infer the bigger picture. So, yeah.
Right. So maybe a topic for both the user side and the confidential information side to be addressed in future projects. Thank you very much, Athena. And Janne, as you pointed out, you are looking at several aspects from privacy to security to some areas of compliance and standardization. What are your views on this subject?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, there's a lots of good stuff coming through, so I will not repeat what the others were already saying, but completely agree. And I see that this panel is just awesome because we have so many viewpoints already here. Those who know me know that I'm a builder. I really want to jump building something, make things happen, like create the solutions. And day doesn't go by me recognizing that the impact of using AI is still like a huge field of challenges and opportunities. Like we see how there are lots of worries about the impact to the job market, what's actually public opinion about AI usage for multiple different applications. So recognizing those, not ignoring them, but because I'm a solution-oriented person, I always see opportunities everywhere, and I'm kind of optimistic when I'm looking for the field as my background is building operations teams and working around that kind of engineering. And I think the main viewpoint I have at this time is that I'm so optimistic for the maturity of our starting point. Like Rohit and was it Chris said, like there are already really good standards in place for data quality, but there's also good standards for AI operations, like the ISO 42001 and the NIST risk management framework for AI. I think those are like perfect starting point for any operation who's running or building AIs to start looking how they secure, how they build the operation around that. And then if we take the learnings from SDLC, SecOps, and expand those to be AI SDLC and MLOps, it needs additional viewpoints, it needs additional professional, ethics, and like the people who actually understand the impact are able to verify the bias. But there's nothing really unknown to start at this point. And I really like it because seeing the world learning to build secure systems, then jumping in a privacy without really clear understanding what privacy means, we are way better starting point at the moment. So any company starting to work with AI or offering AI services, they have multiple resources or starting points. Of course, resources are always a challenge, but I'm fully optimistic on this side. The flip side is there is no automation of ensuring the data is not biased. We have automation for verify ML, AI fairness, 360 and fair learn, which are helping for the bias on the PII, but non-PII data verification is super hard. There are mathematical models, but they are not proven functional at the moment. So there are a lot of technical challenges and opportunities, what really makes me excited about. But the problems are huge and probably never will be solved entirely. But on my viewpoint, I see there's a lot of good things to do, and we can already start today. We don't need to wait the AI grow bigger. And I like to point on Joshua's point on this, okay, if we talk generative AI, yeah, it's a different problem set if we talk about traditional AI, where we can actually quite well verify the non-bias and we can focus on that. Is it actually accurate? Because the scope is more narrow, so you can actually understand what the AI is giving out. But this kind of huge generative AI, which is specialist of everything, measuring that can be super challenging. But I just like to drop it at the end that I'm putting a lot of hope for the recursive self-improvement, that I think that will solve most of the problems, but of course it will introduce a lot of new problems as well.
Thank you. It's great to have an optimistic view in this discussion. It is true that the recursive analysis can help in some situations, but the data set, the global data set for those models is so enormous, it will be certainly complicated to do it in this space. What do you think, Janne, about synthetic data? Where does it fit in? Does it help? And if so, in what way? Does it help the accuracy or does it simply help in different ways, like improving data balance, but not necessarily accuracy?
Yes, I saw it again two-way. It depends how we are running the synthetic data. It can fill the gaps. Think about differential privacy, where we are feeding information to make it more or less identifiable, but still solid. That kind of approach, in my opinion, should help of filling the gaps. But the problem is that if we have a huge data set, then how we are actually measuring it did the job. And therefore, building the synthetic data, fitting it in to remove the bias or wrong balance in a model is an opportunity. But if the model is too big and we don't have automated way of measuring it, we don't know is it good or bad. And therefore, it's an opportunity can be used probably on more vertical models, like, narrowly scoped models instead of huge ones. But yeah, I'm optimistic that something like that might be coming. And the other thing is that all in all, I think the current training, which needs like, petabytes of information, there's something wrong in it in general. So I think we should learn some better ways of doing the training, and maybe the synthetic data and like recursive self-improvement is one way forward what might help, or then the general artificial intelligence may help us is the other way. But at the moment there are no silver bullets, but I'm hoping the synthetic data will help as well. Oh, by the way, one other thing I think is like when we are building the models, we should keep in mind that the data verification standards are super important, because that helps the community start looking into those as well. So it's I like standards. They are not really solving all the problems, but they are helping to solve the problems.
They certainly are helping. Thank you, Janne. George, from your point of view as an engineer, what do you think synthetic data is doing to the engineering side of modern AI systems? I am familiar with several types of systems, notably, for instance, security attack modeling that are predominantly based on synthetic data and simulations. How do you think it affects the field at large?
It's a very important question. You mentioned simulation there. I think that's actually a critical aspect of the answer. So you all may have seen kind of some worries about modern, like upcoming large language models being trained on the outputs of language models, and how there may be a degradation in quality. So it is a concern. The question is exactly how important it is, but generally speaking, I see it, and I think others see it as kind of a measure. Like if you think about the data that you're using for training, synthetic or otherwise, you can think of it in terms of entropy, which is kind of the amount of information present in that data, which is also equally how surprising that data is. So if I were to say something to you that was very surprising to you, it's because you didn't expect me to say it, which means it carries a lot of information. So these models, because they're exploiting patterns, they can learn the low entropy stuff very, very well. This is things like how to bake chocolate chip cookies, because it's seen like 1,600 different ways to do that in the training set, right? It doesn't even really matter which technique it ultimately tells you. Then there's and also just the way language works, the way words follow each other, it's pretty low entropy because it's very predictable. Once you kind of start the sentence, you kind of know where it's going. Medium entropy is kind of where these models are most being used, very good at. This would be things like kind of more domain specific things, like you ask questions about physics or chemistry or whatever, and or you give it complex instructions to run actions for you. So that's why these models are so revolutionary, is because they can also handle those kind of instructions. The high entropy information is effectively the unpredictable information. So this is the stuff that it won't even be able to really remember or utilize correctly. It'll just hallucinate it. So when we think about synthetic data, we have to think about how much entropy there is in that data. And if the way I try to think of it is, as long as we're generating synthetic data from some sort of process that starts from high entropy, it will decrease over time as you use models to manipulate it and then ultimately train on it. But if, for example, vulnerability or discovery, if you're generating sample code and then testing that code actually does the thing that you think it does, and then you train on it, that's still high entropy or medium or whatever, because it's kind of vetted before it goes in. But if you're generating stuff and then training on it and not really checking in the middle, it's probably just going to reduce the quality of your model. So when we built an LLM for the energy sector, we use research papers as the input source, like the human written quality input source. We manipulated it, but that didn't decrease the quality all that much. It did some, right? Because we're missing some of the nuance that some people put in their papers because we're rewriting them before we train on them. But that's the thing to keep in mind is the quality will gradually decrease every time you use an LLM as far as like the entropy, the amount of information content present. And so trace that as you're developing synthetic data.
Fascinating. And it's impressive that you could articulate those complex issues in such a clear way. Certainly, what you call high entropy information, synthetic data or not synthetic data, is the aspirational fruit of artificial intelligence. Like, can you develop processors, modern chips with artificial intelligence where you cannot make mistakes and there is so much information. But it's really enlightening on how synthetic data plays in various situations that you describe. Vidas, as a lawyer, what do you think are the issues with the massive introduction of synthetic data in various data sets? You are on mute.
Thank you. So I think it really depends on who you're, from the legal perspective, when you look at a compliance regime and what the intended purpose is, it's more around the application and whether the impact of the quality of the synthetic data involved and how it improves or impacts the overall reliability of or the end use of the model. But we also see a lot of problem with validation of other types of data anyway. And so, seeing representations of data meeting certain standards and then going in to validate and finding that that's not the case. And so at least with synthetic data, there's just the known origin of it versus leaving it open to the human trained AI. So, but yeah, I'd really go.
Thank you, Vidas. And you brought the other topic, or rather another topic I would like to discuss today, data provenance. The way data are collected today for those models makes provenance sometimes very clear, leading to quite a few of copyright lawsuits against various model owners, or it's very unclear. So what can be done to improve our knowledge about provenance? And at first, I want to talk about both the process and the technology. I think now you probably looked at it in the course of your projects.
So provenance of training data, or so for training data, there are the one of the most elegant solutions I have seen is watermarking. If the model owner cooperates, so that is technically possible. If, let's say, OpenAI or whoever trains that model wants to support watermarking, that can help with proof of whether your data has been used in the data set or not. Is that what you're asking, or?
Yes, training data is certainly the most relevant with regard to the importance of provenance. I read that a significant amount of training data comes from sources such as Reddit or Stack Exchange. It's impossible to put watermarks on those, right? Or even assess their quality reliably. What do you think about this?
So it is well known that the popular LLM models today have trained on publicly available data, and there are now a number of lawsuits about copyright. New York Times was a very not well-known one. It is possible for if the companies that train the data want to implement to support watermarking, they can do it. There's just not incentive for the first one to do it, because then they will have to bear the liabilities as well. So it's not a technical problem; it's more like a ecosystem problem. It is technically also removing data from a training data set is not easy. That problem is called machine learning, and is not easy to solve either. There are also more empirical approaches that try to test whether your data have been in the data set, more experimental ways. But that's a very active space. Maybe somebody else knows another methodology beyond watermarking that is a good candidate.
Thank you. It's indeed a very active space with a lot of opinions, a lot of approaches, from standards-based and process-based to technology-based to legal environment-based. So I think, Rohit, you could probably tell us about how the standards world treats provenance.
So there's a couple of things, right? So I think Tina mentioned about one aspect which is fairly complex. If you look at, and I'm actually going to go back to your earlier question about synthetic data as well, right? So synthetic data, the vast usage of synthetic data that proved to be extremely useful, especially for self-driving cars, right? When they were training self-driving cars, it actually helped enable a quantum improvement in terms of the technology. Now, in the generative AI world, there is, in the case of images, yes, there is watermarking the source of the image. But when we are generating large amounts of text, and for example, if I'm using a generative AI model or a ChatGPT kind of application for my research report, and I am using it extensively, so I'm actually using synthetic data in a way. It's generated out of a foundational model. It could have hallucination, it could have errors, but if I haven't checked it, I have published it, with my name. It's now an authentic source in the public domain. And the fact that there is actually synthetic data behind it, there is inaccuracy behind it, and models getting trained now, what is published by a trusted source that lands up in Wikipedia. And it's a propagation of errors that compounds and also confuses, the provenance of this data could be traced to me, but it could well be something completely hallucinated. And that's where I think the complications that we are living when, as usage is increasing extensively, people are, ISO does have a policy. You can't use generative AI models to create standards or to write them in standards. But you can imagine if somebody started using it even in standards and there are errors and hallucination, your trusted sources by themselves lose credibility. And we're going to deal with this massive problem in the coming years with the amount of usage that we're seeing worldwide.
Thank you. Excellent point. And certainly, having built a lot of engineering type AI, generative AI systems, for instance, related to semiconductors, I can say that this accuracy, quality, completeness is a significant issue to enable those applications to a degree that is greater than mitigating some of the early work in those engineering projects. We have just a few minutes left, and I would like to ask everyone the question that Josh just proposed. We talked about data governance issues as AI data governance issues with regard to predominantly generative AI. So what is so different in generative AI compared to other applications that use data, like traditional search, for instance? What is the main difference you can establish? Please provide a brief answer to this one, and we'll go in the reverse alphabetical order. Jana, what is different about data governance for generative AI, if anything?
The main thing to me, what I've been always like thinking is a kind of weird thing, is that there's an AI which is moderating the AI. So practically the large language models, when they operate as a raw, they push through all kind of stuff. So we need to moderate the responses before those are sent to the individual, and I think that's a big difference. Of course, with the databases, somebody has to look the responses as well, but that's one big thing. The other thing I'd like to say is that I would really want to see the identity management as a part of the solution with the generative AI. Like whatever AI there is, it's supposed to have a digital ID when it's browsing through the internet, especially with the agentic AIs, that we know its origin, we know who released it and where it's coming from. But these are the opportunities and challenges, thinking about generative AI especially, but agentic AI as well.
Thank you, Jana. So you are concerned or highlight here the issue of moderation that is different and the need for identity associated with generative AI. Athena, what do you think?
So one aspect that is different is the hallucination, obviously. So if we replace one box that does search, we have accuracy questions. And the second one is the one that was already touched upon, data ownership or provenance. So if Gen AI produces something, who is responsible for it? Is it the LLM responsible for it? Is it the user that prompted the wrong way? Is the original data? So who bears responsibility? So I think these two aspects.
And very important one. So hallucinations and true data ownership and data origin. And now, Chris, what is your view? What is the difference in generative AI?
So I'm just speaking from my use cases and experience here. And in that, I would say that the question is really the wrong one, because it's not about data. The way I tend to think about foundational models is that these are intelligences that you can use. So the question of data isn't really relevant because you have intelligence, and then it's how do you use the intelligence?
Interesting point of view. Not everyone believes that LLMs are intelligent, but they certainly have some level of intelligence, and
they can
if
pretend
that is
pretty
the
well.
case, then there is less relevance to data than we might think. Very interesting point. Rohit, what is your view?
So I'll click on one portion that I think the question that Joshua had asked, because Athena covered the main problem, which is the hallucination. But what if the AI component were replaced with a traditional search tool, right? So the fundamental difference, like the world in which we're living in, we grew up using search tools last, 25, 28 years, where you searched on a term, you searched on a question, you got a bunch of links to a bunch of websites, and you formed an opinion. You clicked on a website and you informed yourself about it, right? So that's a model. When you clicked on a website, you had a sense of the authenticity of the website, the authorship of it, and you formed an opinion based on that. In the new world in which you're searching and getting answers, where the foundational models and the LLMs are themselves inferring from all this content all over the world and actually informing you, sometimes information that's incorrect, right? And that's where they're shaping your opinion, they're informing you, and they're not always accurate. They're they are having a very massive effect. And that is the place where, the difference is really amplified.
Thank you. So you are also saying that it is sort of the nature of moderation and the
Right.
last step in data processing. I agree. A very valid point. Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think actually it's convenient and realistic and practical to think of an LLM or generative AI as a person, not because I think they're as smart as people or anything like that, but the role that they play in a procedure or workflow. If you think of it as a person, it's a person that is not super knowledgeable, but can do some work that, can kind of take some load off, and so on and so forth. So if we think of the policies and frameworks, legal frameworks and standards and so on, my question when reviewing those would be, are there parts that are implicitly assuming someone's going to do the right thing? Like, of course, someone will review this report, or no one would make that kind of crazy decision or whatever. So are there gaps? And it's kind of interesting to think about that, because what we would really be doing with these policies is saying, if I don't even know who the actors are, is this still a good process, right? Are we covering our bases correctly? And AI or not, that's probably a good idea to do that work. But I think that's a convenient way to think about the role of generative AI.
Thank you very much. It looks like all the opinions here coalesce about the kind of moderation between the final use of information and its provision. We talked about moderation, hallucination, intelligences rather than data. You said AI models are like a person, perhaps without the best knowledge on the subject, but some knowledge. It's interesting that from very different points of view, we all came to the same conclusion. Now, Vigdis, the final opinion from a lawyer on this subject.
Well, I really agree with all that was said, but I think I'd just add the lack of established procedural best practices is really there. The novelty and the needing to educate more on the relevant considerations is the other part that we really see as the differentiation when dealing with generative AI over other types of technology and data.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. It's very impressive to me that from different points of view, answering the same questions in different ways, we came to the same conclusion in this final question. And this certainly leads me to be almost as optimistic as Jana about where we may be going from here. Thank you very much for the fascinating discussion. We already had requests to continue it. This is certainly a topic of interest to everyone, various aspects of governance in AI, data, and other things. We hope to see you again on one of the future panels. And thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and participating today. I now pass it to David for concluding remarks.
All right, thank you very much, Claire, and thank you to all you panelists. That was a really fascinating discussion. As Claire intimated, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and we might be calling upon you again in a few months' time when the goalposts will again have moved significantly, as they are doing in this domain. So with that, the recording will be available in a few days, and also the report. Thank you again so much, and I wish you all